Monchhichis are one of those toys that feels like a time capsule, a small, fuzzy reminder of the 1980s. And yet, in recent years, they have been rising again in popularity, not just as a nostalgic throwback, but as a symbol of a larger cultural trend where people are looking for comfort, softness, and a sense of childlike joy in a world that often feels too sharp and fast. The story of Monchhichis begins in Japan in 1974, when the company Sekiguchi created a line of dolls that were designed to be cute, cuddly, and a little bit magical. Their name is derived from the words mon, which translates to mine in French, and chichi, which closely resembles the sound a child's pacifier would produce according to Japanese phonetics. The dolls were intentionally designed with big eyes, round faces, and a soft body that made them feel like a mix between a baby, a monkey, and a plush toy. They were immediately popular in Japan, and the character became part of a broader trend in Japanese culture known as kawaii, which emphasizes cuteness, innocence, and emotional warmth. This aesthetic was not just about how things looked, but about how they made people feel, offering a sense of comfort and simplicity in a rapidly modernizing society. The Monchhichi dolls were not just cute, they were designed to be interactive. Many came with accessories like pacifiers, bottles, or small outfits, and their hands were shaped so they could hold onto objects, which made them feel more alive than a typical stuffed animal. They were marketed as companions, toys that could be part of everyday play rather than just decorations. This made them especially appealing to children, but also to adults who appreciated the craftsmanship and emotional appeal. The dolls made their way to the United States in the late 1970s and early 1980s, during a period when American toy culture was rapidly expanding and becoming more global. They arrived at a time when kids were already obsessed with colorful, character-driven toys, and Monchhichis fit into that world perfectly. They were soft and huggable, but also had a personality and a sense of whimsy that made them stand out. The early 1980s were a golden era for toys that became cultural icons, and Monchhichis were part of that wave, competing for attention alongside action figures, dolls, and other character brands. In 1983, Monchhichis reached a new level of cultural prominence when they turned to a Saturday morning cartoon series. The show followed the adventures of the Monchhichi family and their friends in a magical forest, and it introduced the characters to a much wider audience beyond toy stores. The cartoon emphasized themes of friendship, kindness, and simple moral lessons, which fit well with the wholesome image of the dolls. For many kids of that era, the Monchhichi show was a defining part of their childhood, and the characters became more than toys. They became a part of a shared cultural memory. However, like many toy crazes, the Monchhichi popularity eventually faded as new trends emerged. The 1980s and 1990s brought an influx of new characters, technology-based toys, and increasingly aggressive marketing strategies, and Monchhichis gradually became less visible. The dolls never disappeared entirely, but they moved from mainstream consciousness into a quieter niche, maintained by collectors and people who remembered them fondly. This period of relative obscurity is important because it sets the stage for their resurgence decades later. When something fades, it becomes ripe for rediscovery, especially when it carries emotional weight for people who grew up with it. In the early 2000s, as nostalgia for the 1980s began to rise, Monchhichi started appearing again in vintage toy shops, online marketplaces, and collector communities. This was a time when pop culture began recycling itself more openly, with reboots, remakes, and throwback aesthetics becoming common. Monchhichis benefited from this cultural shift because they were a perfect symbol for a softer, simpler era. They were also well suited to the internet age, where communities could form around shared memories and obscure interests. The rise of social media allowed collectors and fans to connect, share photos, and trade dolls, creating a new kind of cultural life for the characters. The recent resurgence of Monchhichis has been influenced by a broader trend toward comfort and nostalgia, especially among younger adults who are living in a world marked by uncertainty, constant digital stimulation, and social stress. The appeal of a Monchhichi is not just its cuteness, but the emotional response it triggers. In a time when many people are seeking comfort items, Monchhichis fit the role perfectly. They are small, portable, and visually designed to evoke warmth. They are also inherently collectible, which gives people a sense of ownership and connection to a particular cultural moment. Another factor contributing to their comeback is the growing interest in retro and vintage fashion, design, and toys. The 80s and 90s have become a major source of inspiration for contemporary aesthetics, and Monchhichis fit neatly into that visual language. They are often featured in photos alongside other nostalgic items like cassette tapes, old video consoles, and vintage clothing, creating a cohesive vibe that appeals to many young people. This trend is not just coming back, but about remixing the past in a way that feels fresh and personal. The resurgence of Monchhichis also ties into the popularity of Japanese pop culture globally. Anime, kawaii design, and character brands have become mainstream worldwide, and Monchhichis are a part of that cultural export. They represent a classic example of kawaii that is less polished and more handmade in feel than many modern characters. That imperfect softness is part of their charm, and it makes them feel more human. In recent years, Sekiguchi has continued producing Monchhichis and has also released new versions and limited editions to appeal to collectors. Some of these are designed with updated clothes, special themes, or collaborations with other brands. These releases create excitement and help keep the characters relevant without changing their core identity. The company understands that the appeal of Monchhichis is their nostalgic value, so they balance new releases with respect for the original design. Collectors often seek out vintage models from the 1970s and 80s, which can be valuable depending on condition and rarity. The secondary market has become an important part of the Monchhichi story, because it shows how the dolls have become cultural artifacts rather than just toys. People buy them not only to play with them, but to preserve and display, like pieces of personal history. This collector culture has also fueled online communities where people share tips on care, restoration, and authentication, turning the dolls into kind of a hobby that connects strangers through shared appreciation. Monchhichis have also been embraced by the wider world of cute culture, which includes everything from plush toys to character goods, and this community often overlaps with other nostalgia-driven moments like soft girl aesthetics and cottagecore. The emotional tone of these movements is gentle, cozy, and focused on comfort, which aligns perfectly with the Monchhichi vibe. The dolls have become symbols of emotional softness, a way for people to signal that they value warmth and tenderness in a world that can feel harsh. This is part of why the resurgence feels more meaningful than a simple nostalgia cycle. It is tied to a cultural desire for comfort and emotional care. Another reason Monchhichis are rising again is their versatility. They can be used as toys, collectibles, fashion accessories, or decorative items. People display them on shelves, carry them on bags, or include them in photos and videos. Their small size and iconic look make them easy to incorporate into modern life. They also fit into the current trend of miniature culture. In a chaotic world, tiny things can feel manageable and reassuring. Monchhichis also have a unique place in the history of toys because they blend several categories at once. There are dolls, plush toys, and character figures, and that hybrid nature gives them broad appeal. They are not tied to a specific franchise or story in the way that many modern toys are, which makes them feel more universal. A Monchhichi can be whatever the owner wants it to be. That openness is part of their charm, and it allows people to project their own meanings onto them. The rise of Monchhichis also reflects a growing appreciation for toys as design objects. People today often look back at older toys and recognize the craftsmanship and aesthetic choices that were made. Monchhichis have a distinctive design that feels both simple and expressive. Their faces were minimal but emotive, and their bodies are soft and rounded in a way that feels comforting. This design has held up over time because it's rooted in an emotional goal rather than a trend. The dolls were designed to make people feel good, and that intention still translates decades later. In addition to their physical design, Monchhichis have cultural history that makes them interesting beyond their appearance. They are part of the story of how Japanese culture began influencing global pop culture in a major way. They show how a local aesthetic can become global when it taps into universal emotions. They also represent a period when toys were not yet dominated by massive corporate franchises, when smaller character brands could still become major phenomena. This history makes them feel like relics of a different era, which adds to their appeal in a world where many products are designed to be disposable. As Monchhichis continue rising again, they are also being reinterpreted by new generations. People who never grew up with the dolls are discovering them through social media. They are creating new meanings around them. Some view Monchhichis as retro art, others see them as comfort objects, and some simply enjoy them for their cuteness. This new layer of interpretation shows that the dolls are not trapped in the past. They're able to evolve because their core appeal is emotional rather than tied to a specific storyline. The resurgence of Monchhichis also intersects with the broader shift in how people consume media culture. In the age of streaming, content is often fragmented, and people are constantly seeking small pockets of joy. Monchhichis offer a tiny, tangible form of that joy. They are physical objects in a digital world, which makes them feel even more special. Holding a Monchhichi can feel like a form of a resistance to the constant digital noise, a way to reconnect with something simple and real. This is why they become popular among people who are also interested in analog hobbies like journaling, collecting, or crafting. The rise again of Monchhichis is not just a nostalgic trend, but a reflection of a deeper cultural shift toward comfort, softness, and emotional warmth. Their history as a Japanese toy that became a global phenomenon shows how a simple design rooted in care can travel across cultures and decades. Their resurgence today is fueled by nostalgia, the appeal of kawaii culture, and the desire for emotional support, the desire for emotional comfort, and the power of online communities. Monchhichis have become more than toys. They are symbols of a gentler time and a reminder that small things can carry big meaning. As the world continues to move faster, it makes sense that people would return to a toy that feels like a warm, quiet hug from the past. And in that way, Monchhichis are not just rising again, they are returning as a cultural need. A soft reminder that sometimes what we crave most is something that simply feels good. Like, comment, and subscribe for daily history and culture content.